Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Guy Yedwab from Explore Analytics. Hope you're all doing safe and well wherever you are. I'm the Chief Technology Officer, and today we're going to walk through, using mashups, using capabilities within Explore Analytics to combine data from different tables within ServiceNow and data outside of ServiceNow. So just to talk a little bit about the kinds of places where you're going to want to combine data that's in disparate silos, when you're talking about any process that you're using ServiceNow to manage, invariably there's going to be multiple tables within ServiceNow and multiple tables of data that sit outside of ServiceNow that will want to be pulled together. So take, for example, incident management. Within ServiceNow, primarily it's on the incident table, but there's also important information in the SLA table. There may be related information in the problem and the change tables. Maybe there are pre-existing database views or dot walks that you can do, but maybe there are ways you want to combine the data that ServiceNow isn't allowing for. Furthermore, there's probably data that impacts your understanding of these processes, but isn't in ServiceNow. Chat data that's sitting in your chat system, the call system, customer data that'll help you understand more context about where these incidents are coming from. Maybe you were using a system before ServiceNow and took the ServiceNow best practice of not importing all those legacy incidents into your system. And maybe ad hoc things come up, like a temporary mapping of assignment groups or things like that that you want to use to better understand the data. So you can see that there's a whole wealth of information that you want to bring together. And I didn't make this scenario up. This is actually something that one of the Explore Analytics users was doing. They had all of these different silos of data. They wanted to get one holistic, business-focused view of the data that was in the terms of the customer, and so wanted to get all of the customer interaction. And they wound up connecting to 7 data sources within a few weeks using Explore Analytics to really get those end-to-end understanding of data. Another common example is project management. I didn't even want to include on this slide how many different tables and systems might be involved in project management. Tables that have to do with actual, tables that have to do with the plan, the resource allocations, the tasks themselves. There might be costing data in ServiceNow. There might be costing data out of ServiceNow. If you're doing this in a services context or some other business project context, there might be sales data associated to it. And again, there might be ad hoc things like project codes that might be specific for a particular report you're building and might not be worth the effort of building out into a system that's sitting in Excel. So again, you want to bring this data together and put it to the users, whether they're executives, whether they're project managers or resource managers, in a seamless way. And there may be user interfaces, bespoke user interfaces that exist in project management, but once you want to really get into some fine analytics, you need something that makes it very easy to pull that together. Now, everything that we're going to talk about today is about giving you a sustainable way of reporting against this. But I'm actually going to raise the level of difficulty because, there's a lot of ways that you can get within ServiceNow to get your way to a report, whether it's, coded UI pages or scheduled jobs or importing the data. But I want to raise the level of difficulty, which is that we want to make these reports in a sustainable way, which means without requiring a lot of manual massaging of the data, without requiring you to write code or duplicate data, importing it or exporting it, and without needing an administrative change every time you want a new report. So we're not going to build database views. We're not going to create custom fields just for reporting. We're going to use a drag and drop system to get that information. Now, when you're looking at that slide of all these different tables and data sources, the typical way that people have looked at this in the past is a data warehouse. Copy all of that data into one big data set, one place for the data, join, create this perfect data model, and only then can you build reports and distribute to users. Again, we want to ask for something more from our reporting. We don't want to have to make pulling all the data into the same data source a prerequisite for getting the report you want. And maybe once you've employed ServiceNow, the shift is basically to do the same thing, but with ServiceNow as the data source, right? Pull all the data into ServiceNow, make ServiceNow a single perfect data model with data, with database joins and schedule jobs, copying data from place to place. It may be a little bit better of a user interface, but it's still creating a management nightmare of the data. So what do I see most organizations doing instead? Manager asks for data and he gets a pile of Excel spreadsheets. You want the people who are receiving the data to be able to get it in a way that's still interactive, that still has all of the great self-service SaaS benefits without being a management nightmare on the back end. So that's why we're going to use Explore Analytics to show you how to combine this data across the tables and across the data sources. Explore Analytics connects to both ServiceNow and to other sources of data in real time. So when we look at an example in a little bit of pulling together ServiceNow incidents with calls from a call system, it's going to be making those queries in real time, not requiring any special database skills to set things up, not requiring any code, just dragging and dropping. And then you can also import Excel spreadsheets, which will also show an example so that you can supplement and expand the data. It'll give you all of the benefits of having the data in one place without having to get ETLs, without having to actually move or copy the data. The data sits where it is, and Explore Analytics lets you read that data. And we'll be touching on self-service reports that you can really just ad hoc drag and drop. So where today, instead of exporting the data out and using an Excel so that you can do calculations easily on the fly, you can do that in real time directly against the data. Once you have those reports, you can choose to put them in real-time operational dashboards. I'll show an example of that. Or do standard metrics that snapshot over time the data that you're getting. Again, regardless of where the data sits, how the data is modeled on the back end, we're going to create that single pane of glass that's very easy for users to consume. So now that we've set the goal and we kind of understand the problem a little bit, let's get into it and see a few examples. There's a couple of different strategies of how in Explore Analytics you can interact with the data to combine data across different sources. So I'm going to walk through a couple examples so you can kind of see how it works and get thinking about use cases that you might use in your environment. Let's start with, I mentioned briefly, one common question that gets asked when you're first setting up ServiceNow is, should we import 10 years of backlog incidents from another system, or should we start our incident table fresh? And in a lot of cases, you wound up starting your incident table fresh, but you want to see how the current trend of incidents and the past trend of incidents might combine. So in Explore Analytics, I have this simple drop-down driven report building user interface. So in a legacy, against the legacy data table of incidents, I've grouped it by date. I've pulled together the sum of total incidents. So now I have this timeline that goes up through the end of 2017, showing the number of incidents that I had per month. And now I also have another report that I've created in a very similar way that's looking at the reports, since the beginning of 2018 when hypothetically my ServiceNow incident went live. This is a real-time report against the ServiceNow data that's pulling together that trend. If I want to combine this information together, I'm going to go to the file and say new mashup view, and I'm going to select incident table and this incident trend, call it first mashup ever, to celebrate this new skill I'm exploring. Now what you'll notice is now I have a single data set that's moving seamlessly from 2015, 2016, 2017, all the way up through today in 2018. Well, today in my demo instance. You'll have to forgive that my demo instance is a little historical. The reason that this is displaying the way it is because in both reports, I labeled the sum as total incidents. And so the mashup knew to combine these two different reports together in one set of data. Now let's get a little bit more sophisticated. Let's bring in even more information into this. I'm going to go into the edit input views. The input views are the views I mashed up together to get this single trend. I'm going to say, let's add another input view, and let's pull in a report that I created that's against a call system. So now we have something that's going into my, my SQL database and pulling out calls, as well as another table in my SQL database that has the historical trend and the incidents in my ServiceNow system. And you can see that now I have two sets of data. So because one of them, and I'm going to actually make the y-axis merged so that we're comparing apples to apples in the y-axis. We merged the two sets of incidents because they were both called total incidents, but the calls had a separate label and therefore we overlaid it. So now I can see here's the number of incidents per month against the number of calls. Now let's suppose I want to see what that ratio is. What's the ratio of incidents to calls? All I have to do is click this calculator icon and say, all right, I want to see what my ratio of incidents to calls are. We will call that ratio. Right, so now I have a line down here that's showing the ratio. Maybe I actually only want to see the ratio, and maybe I want to, let's say, format it as a percent, right? Say, you know, the conversion rate from incidents to calls is, you know, what have you. So I just want to highlight what we've done with just a few clicks, because again, blink and you could miss it. It's that easy. We're running queries against 3 tables, one of which is ServiceNow. The other 2 are in other data sources. We're stitching them together, in some cases making one set of data, in another case overlying multiple sets of data. And we're running a calculation against it with a simple filter builder. I didn't have to make any changes to ServiceNow or to my other data source to be able to get that. It's still something that's real time, and it's even still drillable where I can get into the incidents that underlie that. So you can see that this is a really powerful way of pulling together different pieces of information. And that same mashup capability is something that, for example, in resource management, here this is an example that's using a pivot. We're bringing together a table of requested hours. We're bringing together the actual hours, so that might be, you know, against the resource allocations and against either time cards or, you know, project tasks. And again, we're using this calculation to show the variance between them. Here, I've also colored it to say, hey, you know, look, our actual hours are significantly below the requested hours, you know, what have you. That same capability of combining multiple sets of data and doing that calculation is also something that we have here. This is a change management example. This report is showing me what's the percent of changes that were of the type emergency. What we're actually pulling together is all of the changes and the emergency changes, and then doing that same formula to say, well, what percent of the change of all changes were emergency changes? That's combining the same table a few times in order to be able to easily get this very, you know, useful measure, which here we have a 20% goal, and we can see using our forecasting capability that we're slowly moving our way towards hitting that goal. So that's a pretty simple example with timelines. When you're mashing things up, the x-axis is mashed up based on the fact that it's time, and then the value is mashed up based on the label. Let's show a little bit more of a challenging example historically to see, you know, how this mashup can help you really get past some data issues. So in this use case, I want to understand, based on my different models of assets, what models are having the most issues. So this is a report that I built in ServiceNow against the asset table, and it's showing to me the models, right? So the number of assets that we have per each model. Now, if you're familiar with ServiceNow, you know the field in ServiceNow that I'm grouping on is called model, and I'm showing how many assets of each model we have. So now I'm going to go to another report that I've created, which is also a pivot that's on the incident table that's showing how many incidents there are per model, right? So I want to say how many complaints are we getting per model, and then I'm going to combine that with how many of those models we have so I can get a sense of which ones are the most problematic. If you know ServiceNow, then you know that the field here is CMDB-CI, or configuration item .walk to asset .walk to model. Now, without making any changes to the database or anything like that, when I combine this together, you're going to see the challenge that you might come across when you're trying to combine data is that there's no necessary common denominator. And so right now, how are we going to tell Explore Analytics how to combine the data? What's great is that it's a very easy step that the user can do for themselves. I'm going to go back into my input view, and I'm just going to relabel. I'm not making any change to ServiceNow. Just here in the report, I'm going to say, treat this field as being called model. And then in the other report, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to say, hey, treat this field as being called model. And now when I go back to my original report, it says, oh, both of those reports had model in the rows. So that's how we're going to combine this data together. And the columns that had the values have different names. So we're going to keep those separate. And now I can see that, this Apple iMac had 64 incidents for 11, whereas this MacBook Air had a lot more incidents, but that's also because we have a lot of more MacBook Airs. And again, just a simple calculation to say, okay, what's the number of incidents per asset? So that I can actually see which assets are the most problematic in our environment. I'm sure any of you who've been in IT for any amount of time will recognize that unknown models cause the most issues. Not a surprise there. But again, you can see with these Dells that I can combine this Dell that has 9.3 incidents per one versus, down here, the Precision Workstation on average has less per model. Again, a report that's running against two separate tables. I actually did a little bit of data mapping, did a calculation on top of it, no code, no change request, no update set required. I could just do that myself in this real-time report. Now, this virtual column that I created, this incidents per asset, if I want to track that over time, I just go to the File menu and say Track Trend, and it'll save the results of this report to a table on a schedule that I define. So for example, weekly, monthly, quarterly, it'll be defined that way. So again, it makes it very easy for you to be able to say, hey, I want to track this data for reports. Again, I don't need an administrator or code or something to be able to get that. It provides the people who are building these reports a lot more independence and a lot less opportunity for, administrative changes to go awry. We always want to minimize those. So this is an example of using our mashup capability. There's another way that's a little bit more advanced, but very helpful if you want to combine data from multiple places. Let me show you what I mean. Let's suppose that I have this report. I want to do incidents. I originally made a report by assignment groups, but I realized we have way too many assignment groups in our system, and this report isn't useful because you can see each is just a tiny slice, and then there's this big other. What I really want to do is to map the assignment groups to something more readable, like an assignment level, level 1, level 2, level 3. Now, we could decide to go and re-examine our ServiceNow data model, and maybe that would be a useful exercise, but maybe this is just for one report. It might not even be something that we're going to reuse. So instead, what I did, which I'm sure many of you can confess to having done, was I made a little Excel spreadsheet that maps, these are the level 2s, these are the level 3s, these are the level 1s. I imported it into Explore Analytics. So if I see my groups list table, right, I created a little report here that shows me that I have that data stored within Explore Analytics. Now, instead of mashing it up, which is might be one approach to take, we're going to use another way of combining data within Explore Analytics, which is something called the lookup field. The way that the lookup field works is right now I'm pulling up the list of incidents by assignment level, and I'm going to create a formula similar to what we did before, but here I'm going to use some kind of Excel style helper functions. There's one called Lookup, right? So we're going to say, okay, we want to look up using the assignment group on the incident table, go to the Explore data source, look up that table that we had called groups list, find that group and bring me back the level. So we'll call this level. So now it's going to add a virtual column to this ServiceNow list that's basically referring back out to that lookup table that I created. If you're aware of the VLOOKUPs and the lookups in Excel, that's basically all I'm doing here. And you can see that I have this virtual column here. Now you'll notice that there is some blank. Maybe I say, oh, you know what? Actually, we're going to say that any field that's blank is actually a business group. So I'm actually going to make this calculation a little bit more sophisticated to give it a, well, if there's nothing, we're going to call it a business assignment group, right? So that we can report on it that way. Again, something that allows us to deal with the real world inconsistencies of data and things that we want to do to make it a little bit more human readable without, again, having to go and define, anything in tables or anything, right? As a user, I can do this. Now that I have this table with this virtual column, I'm going to go and say, create a new composite view. What a composite view is it allows you to take this virtual table that we've created and treat it as if it was a table to report against. And I want this to be a chart, so we can do this by bar chart, and we'll do it by our new level. So I'm actually grouping by that virtual column that we created. Again, this is very common anytime you want to map multiple statuses to a status. Right? This is a great tool to have in your back pocket for when you're really, the data is all there, but you want to present it in a way that makes sense to a particular business stakeholder, or you want to make sure that it's really understandable. And in order to make this really interactive, I'm also going to establish a drill down path to say, I want them to be able to drill down to assignment group and then to assign to. What that does is now I have this kind of hiding the complexity report where we're showing it at this high level of the level. But if I want to see, okay, well, what are these so-called business assignment groups? I can drill down and see the pivot there. So you can see that with just a couple clicks, we're pulling data from a spreadsheet against real-time data from ServiceNow that's still sitting in ServiceNow, presenting it to users in a way that's very easy for them to understand and interact with. Since we just have a couple minutes left, I just wanted to briefly show you that once you have those reports, the great thing about Explore Analytics is that all of that can be real-time embedded in the ServiceNow user interface. So you can see this call center example that's in ServiceNow. It's using our Explore Analytics dashboard. It has some great explanatory text and information to help people understand. There's a scorecard that's showing me the abandon rate from my call system, alongside first call resolution that's in incident management. It's showing me chat and call queues, the abandon rate from the call system, the incidents open, resolved, and backlog. All of this information in one place to look at in ServiceNow. Under the covers, multiple different data sources, all real time. I didn't have to copy that together. Same with something like a project management dashboard. Here I have multiple slicers, so I could say, well, show me just the ones for the Green IT initiative. Under the covers, there could be all kinds of data being brought together. We're presenting it in a very easy to consume way in one place that's interactive. Thank you all. I know that this is a subject that we've only just scratched the surface on, but I wanted to make sure that you had information on that. If you're interested in trying this out for yourself, if you don't already have Explore Analytics, you can sign up for a free 30-day trial. You can connect that to your dev environment or to one of ServiceNow's development instances. It takes just a few minutes to set up. One of our large, Fortune 50 clients was live within an hour of finding this by themselves. It's just an update set deployment, so it's very quick to do. If you have any questions, you can use the chat to ask them now. There will be a recording available if you wanted to share this with other folks. We're also happy to set up individual times if you want to walk through some of these use cases yourself. give a couple moments for folks if they have questions. Great. So the question was about the ease of setting up those connections to different sources of data. So I'll just very briefly show, if I'm an administrator, uh, if I'm an administrator, what I can do is go to data and then say add a new data source. For ServiceNow, the setup process is download and apply an update set, and then provide us credentials to be able to log into your instance from our instance. To show another example, if I'm looking at, say, an Oracle data source, there's an agent that you can add that allows us to connect to the database without you having to open up the firewall. It's similar to ServiceNow's mid-server if you've used that. And then once that agent is in place, again, all you have to do is provide us with some basic information on where to connect to that data source. The host, the username might vary a little bit from database to database, but again, making it very easy for you to connect directly and get set up. Once we connect, the great thing is that Explore Analytics automatically detects what tables and fields are available in your environment based on your configurations. So if you're familiar with custom tables and fields within ServiceNow, the naming convention is the U underscore. So you can see here the custom tables in my instance that were discovered. So we're not making any assumptions about your data model. Again, the goal is to make this very seamless and easy to use for your users. Another question that came up is where you can access the recording. We'll send a link to the recording afterwards as soon as that's available. Also, what you should take a look at is Explore Analytics. We have a YouTube page that has these webinars. It also has other videos. So for example, this is one that I just pulled up on dashboards and slicers, but you can very easily find in-depth about the mashups, about, there's a set of self-service training. There's specific use cases. So for example, incident aging reports or resource reports. There's a wealth of information there as well so that you can see a lot of these that goes a little bit more step-by-step and in-depth on those issues. Great. Well, I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to thank you for your time. Have a great weekend. Continue to be safe and well. And if you have follow-up questions, again, you can respond back to the invitations you got for this. You can find us on our website as well. We'd be happy to spend time to help you understand how you can get the reports you want from Explore Analytics. Thank you all and have a great day.